So before we get started, I'm just curious, is there anybody for whom the Maha Mrityunjaya is a brand new practice? You've never worked with it or studied it at all? And yeah, so new to you, Kim. All right. Is there anybody who has been working with this that it's part of your, okay, good. So my point in this workshop, and I think this will take probably about an hour. I put that extra 15-minute buffer there in case we need it for questions or anything, is to make you confident in knowing what it says and in how to pronounce it. So it's not going to be a philosophy class. We could definitely look more deeply with these mantras into the philosophy behind them. All right. But in this class, I want it to be a little bit more of a workshop where you come out feeling really confident using this mantra. Okay, that makes sense to everybody. So yeah, I think we'll get going. Like I said, I'll record it and I'll send you guys all the recording too if there's anything you want to see again. And I'm going to use a PowerPoint, and I'll also send you that in a PDF. So feel free to write down anything that will help you that I say. If it's on the PowerPoint, don't worry about scrambling to jot it down, because I know sometimes it's hard to listen and take notes. For me anyways, I know if I'm writing frantically and trying to listen at the same time, it's distracting. So be confident you'll get anything you see in a PDF form. So before I start, I'm just curious, does anybody have any specific questions or anything that they want to address going into it, or just kind of open to what we see? So, well, at the end too, I'll stop and we can ask any questions about practice in general or about this mantra. And I'm going to mute everybody. Hey, Silky. I'm going to mute everybody just so we get a nice clean recording. But please turn on your microphone at any time if you have a question, especially if you start to get confused about anything I'm saying. So better I stop, and if you want to hear it again, so does somebody else. So feel very free to put your microphone on at any time. I don't watch the chat as well. I can see it, but we're a small group, so I'm happy to hear from everybody. Okay. Okay. So let me bring up my PowerPoint. I'm going to do my share screen. Okay, and I'll do it as a slideshow. Okay, it's taking me a minute to get used to PowerPoint again. I used it a lot last spring. Okay, so the Maha Mrityunjaya mantra. And here's a little slide that talks about some of the reasons to use it. It says benefits are awards spiritual merits, releases anxiety and stress, provides peace and relief to the brain, or we might think also to the mind, and helps in the prevention of mishaps. So meaning that it keeps us clear on our life's path. Okay, so I was inspired to do this class by our last Havan. So another time that we would use the Maha Mrityunjaya mantra is when we do our fire ceremony or Havan. And I don't know if, I know some of you have been to the ones at HIB or down in Honesdale, and this is most often the mantra that's used. And there are a couple pronunciation inaccuracies that I hear a lot. So I'm sitting at the fire and different groups of people come up, and there's a few places, and I'll show them to you what they are, that I thought would be really great if we all could consistently pronounce this together well. All right. So this mantra comes from the Rig Veda. And the Rig Veda is the oldest existing spiritual scripture that is still used by a living tradition. Okay, so there's some other ancient texts out there. This is one that is still used. So in India, mantras from the Rig Veda are still used at marriages, funerals, coming of age ceremonies. So the Vedas are still used. And there are two mantras in our tradition that are very important that come from the Rig Veda. One is the Maha Mrityunjaya, and the other is the Gayatri. And if this is useful, we could do the same kind of analysis of the Gayatri mantra, another very beautiful, powerful Vedic mantra. Okay. And then another one is the Sri Sukta. So if you've been around the Himalayan Institute for a while, the Sri Sukta is another practice that folks have been doing for about the last 10 years or so. So that is also a mantra from the Rig Veda. Okay. So the Rig Veda was written down in 1500 BCE. So we are completely confident that it's at least 4,000 years old. Okay. The Vedic tradition, however, was oral for quite a long time before that. So the Rig Veda, and it's a big text, right? It's not a small text. It was memorized. And there were families in India whose job it was to pass on the chanting of the Rig Veda. Okay, so it was father to son, usually in Brahmin families, the priestly families. The fathers would teach their sons how to chant the whole text perfectly. Okay, so it's quite an undertaking. And because of this, we don't really know how old it is. All right, so with confidence, we can say it's 4,000 years old. There are scholars who say it's more likely 5, 6, or 7,000 years old. And even those who claim, due to some of the content in there, it could be 10,000 years old. Okay, so there are astrological and geological commentary in the Vedas that appears to be to date it even much older than that. Okay, so the point in it being so old, why is that interesting? As a mantra, it is deeply empowered. So millions of people have been reciting this mantra for a very long time. And we talk about mantras having not just a literal meaning, but their own pranic shakti. Okay. And as people have been using this and chanting this in a very reverent way for a long time, the mantra itself is empowered just by its sound. So if you were to chant a Vedic mantra, even if you had no idea what you were saying, it will invoke a response, right? It'll invoke a change both in the microcosm, so in your own mental functioning, pranic functioning, as well as in life around you. Okay, so that's one reason that it's really good to have your pronunciation as accurate as you can. Of course, you'll have some allowances, that's fine, but just to be able to be confident that you sound, and you can, based on what we know, you can sound just like somebody chanting this during the classical era. Okay, so I hope that makes sense to everybody. So as I said, this is a mantra that is used for the Havan. It is also a mantra that is used for liberation. Okay, and if we very literally looked at the words, Maha means great. You might know the term Maha Atma or Mahatma means great soul, right? So this word Atman means soul, right? So Maha Atman becomes Mahatma, right? When the words are kind of combined. So Mahatma Gandhi was great soul Gandhi. Okay. Then the next part, Mrityun. Mrityun means death. Jaya means liberation. So it is something like the great death liberation mantra. It is also used at the time of someone's passing. So you can either use it at the time of your own passing or someone you love's passing. So the idea is that it liberates you from the bondage of life, your karmas, your physical body, and eases that transition then into the next stage. It is also liberation from illness. Okay, so the Maha Mrityunjaya mantra is prescribed by Ayurvedic doctors to liberate the body from illness. Okay, so anytime that we feel bound or trapped, whether in a physical sense or in more of a emotional, mental, spiritual sense. It's a liberation mantra. Okay, that makes sense to everybody? Yeah, so these are times you may want to specifically use it. It can, of course, be part of a daily practice. Okay. All righty, so let's look at our next slide. And this is a handout from Nikolai Bachman. And whenever I teach Sanskrit in any form, I do a commercial for him. He is a Sanskrit teacher. He's now based out of Colorado. He was in New Mexico. But he's somebody who went to Kenmore East High School. So he grew up in Western New York. And he is just so thorough in everything he does. There's never any discrepancies. Everything is so clear. Yeah, so I like using his materials when I teach things, just because there's no confusion with his things. And this is a PDF from one of his chant packs. So if you really enjoy Sanskrit mantra, he sells these chant packs on his website. It's sanskritsounds.com. And it comes with the PDF for each mantra, just like this, and also a recording of the mantra spoken slowly and more quickly. Okay. So what I want to do right now is to just look at the literal meaning. Like, what does this mantra say? All right. And the problem sometimes with translation is the person translating something gives you their own opinion on what it means. All right. So that's another thing that I like about Nikolai Bachman's translations. He pretty much gives you a word for word, exact direct translation. All right. So you'll see something in Sanskrit and you'll say, well, this is only, 4 lines long. And then the translation's 4 paragraphs. All right. So you think, okay, somebody is adding something to this. All right. This isn't simply what's there. And when Nikolai adds something to help you understand, he puts it in parentheses. So this is not written here, but this will help you understand. Okay. And I like to read people's translations, but I like to know word for word what I'm saying too. Okay. So what we're going to do now is just look at it word for word. And we won't look at pronunciation yet, so don't worry about that. Okay. Good. So what he does is he gives it to us first here in Devanagari. All right. If that interests you, that's a whole nother course that is fun to do in the Sanskrit courses. And here he gives it in transliteration. So I want to give you one misnomer before you start looking at this. You're going to see these marks. Here you'll see a line that is vertical, right above this first A. You'll see lines underneath the words. And then you'll see this double line here on the last word. So what I'm going to tell you to do is to ignore them. These are Vedic markings. So before Sanskrit was classical Sanskrit, and that's how we use it, it was Vedic. And in Vedic, there were tones, meaning places where the syllable pitch went up or went down or went up and down. So Nikolai is trained to do both, right? To chant things in the classical way. And classical Sanskrit started with the grammar of Panini in 500 before Common Era. So anything you learn at the Himalayan Institute, and probably in most places, will be classical Sanskrit. Before 500, and the language of the Vedas themselves was this old Vedic, had these tone markings. So Nikolai marks them, and when you listen to him chant these, you will see him, you will hear him doing the tone. Okay. We don't need that, but just so you understand what those markings are. There are other markings that are pronunciation markings that are important for classical Sanskrit, and we will talk about those. Okay, that makes sense to everybody? So anything from the Vedas is going to have this marking. Anything after 500 BCE will not have these markings. So Nikolai and some of his chant packs has things from the Yoga Sutras. The Yoga Sutras were written after 500 BCE. There are no tone markings on it. Okay. So that's what those are. Okay, so quite literally, what are we saying when we chant the Maha Mrityunjaya mantra? Okay, first syllable is Om, and Om begins many of our mantras. And if we think about the Vedic tradition being an oral tradition, it was important to chant together. All right, so students would chant together during the fire ceremonies, large groups would chant together. The Om set the tone. It set the pitch for the rest of the mantra. It was the mid-tone. So the Om might have kind of been like tuning the beginning of your mantra. Okay, so we have Om, then we have Triambakam. And if we come down here, we can see Tri means three, Ambaka means eye. So Om, three-eyed one. And the three-eyed one referred to here is the form of the god Shiva. So Shiva appeared in the Vedas as the god Rudra, Rudra, and Rudra later evolved into the more complex form of Shiva in later Hinduism. Okay, so we can look at it that way. More importantly, we're thinking about what the three-eyed one, or Rudra, Shiva, symbolizes. The idea here is the third eye. The third eye is another word for the eyebrow center, or Agya chakra, right? So the third eye is the eye that looks inward. We have two physical eyes that look outward at the world around us. And then we have this internal eye that looks inward. So Shiva is in yoga a symbol for consciousness. And he's considered the god of the yogis, all right, the one who meditates, who contemplates. Okay, so you can look at this in an anthropomorphic way of this being a Hindu god, but more importantly, we're looking at the energy that this symbolizes. Okay, so the Vedic gods were all kind of metaphors for energies in the universe. The three-eyed one, Rudra, Shiva, is consciousness, right? Okay, so this next word, Yajamahe. Yajamahe means, may we all worship. So in Sanskrit, oftentimes the verb is last, okay, in a sentence. So in English, usually we'll put the verb before whatever object we're acting upon. In Sanskrit, usually the verb's all the way at the end. Okay, so something like Om, three-eyed one, may we all worship him. Okay, and then Sugandim comes from Sugandhi, meaning good smelling or fragrant. Okay, these M's on the end, if you're grammatically inclined, just means that this is a direct object, right? So again, describing this three-eyed one as fragrant or good smelling. And then Pushti Vardhanam. We come down here. Pushti means nourishment, increasing. So this three-eyed one is fragrant, good smelling, and increases nourishment. And if you study this mantra a little bit more esoterically, this is the idea of Shiva as a gardener, all right, the metaphor of a gardener. So sweet smelling and nourishment increasing, all right, growing, increasing consciousness. Okay. Okay, this next line, Urva Ruka. Urva Ruka is a kind of cucumber. So Urva Ruka is a kind of spiny looking, bumpy Indian cucumber. And this Eva just means like that. So just like a cucumber. Next word, bandhana, is bound. So just like a cucumber is bound. And if we think a little bit about how cucumbers grow, right? They have these vines, right, that climb up the fence. And sometimes if you've grown your own cucumbers, the vine will wrap around the cucumber and sometimes choke it. All right, so you might have a cucumber that's squeezed in the middle or bound to the fence. Okay, so just like a cucumber can be bound by its own vine. Next line, Mrityur is from Mrityu, death. Mukshya, may I be released. Ma, not. Amritat, from immortality. So just like a cucumber is bound, may I be released from death, not from immortality. Okay. So we're asking this fragrant, nourishing gardener to free us. And as somebody who's tending a garden, you have that ability, right, to loosen the vines so the cucumbers can grow. In the same way, we're asking this gardener of consciousness to free us so we can grow. Okay, and specifically, it's mentioned here from death. And death is sometimes seen as darkness, delusion, confusion, that which is not real. All right, so free us from those things into consciousness of immortality. And then Nikolai's translation is, we worship the three-eyed one, and he inserted Shiva. That's not actually said here, right? It's not named. Who is fragrant and nourishment increasing. And like the cucumber, and then he inserted severed from its bondage to the vine, may I release myself from death, not from immortality. Okay. So if you read a translation of this that says a whole lot more, that was added by somebody who is giving you more of an interpretation. Okay. Clearly, this is just what's being said. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Okay. So I love seeing that with any of the mantras. Yes, Kim.
Yeah. So I love this translation. Love it, love it, love it. Just pulled out the translation from our 500-hour teacher manual. And of course, it's lengthier in its translation. Any comment on that?
Well, my take on all translations, except for something like this, is that it's being explained to you.
Okay. Anyway, it's a beautiful translation. I just wondered if there was any difference in substance or whatever.
And it might depend too what the person teaching it in their translation wants you to use it for. So as I mentioned, it can be seen as a healing mantra. So somebody who's kind of more turning the focus onto the healing aspects of this mantra might add a little bit of that to the translation. All right. So I'm not familiar offhand with what the 500-hour one says right now. I have it in a binder. But yeah, anything beyond this is just teaching, right, in the form of the translation. And if this isn't explained to you, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So if you just picked up this mantra, right, you found it in a book and you read this translation, what exactly does that mean? It doesn't give you much. So sometimes the translations are a way to kind of grasp the depth of what the mantra means. Okay. So to kind of maybe stir you emotionally as well, especially if they're really well written. But you'll find that there are some very different takes on all of them. The Gayatri, just like the Maha Mrityunjaya, is very short. Doesn't say a whole lot, but people will also make the Gayatri quite robust in translation. Okay. And that doesn't mean that the translations are not correct or anything like that, or that you couldn't use them. All right. So if you like to read in English too, these mantras, you could read these translations as well if they speak to you. All right. But I think it's really good for us to know what we're actually saying when we're chanting. Okay. And I think it gives us appreciation for the meaning behind it. So we often say that the meaning isn't as important as the sound vibration, and that's true for our Sanskrit mantras. So if any of you were initiated by Rolf or Panditji, they may have told you the meaning is not as important as the pronunciation of the mantra. And there are mantras out there that are called bija, which are just little syllables like kleem, shreem, hreem. And the meaning of each of these little tiny sounds is several paragraphs, right? So I have notes I took when I had my initiation with Rolf on one of the bijas in my mantra. And it's a one syllable bija mantra. And I have like 3 pages of notes on what it means. So these mantras can be unpacked for sure. All right. All righty. Okay. So let's look at the next one here. So I know some of you did teacher, actually I'm looking, I think you've all done teacher training in this group right here. All right. So in teacher training in the 200 hour, you were subjected to the Sanskrit alphabet. And in the 300 hour again, all right. And then if you've done any other classes, and Rosa's with the Sanskrit group, so you've been subjected to the alphabet every single month for years. And I didn't want to go through the whole entire Sanskrit alphabet because I had the feeling that the people that would be here this morning probably are familiar with it. And it's a great thing to know. That being said, looking at this mantra, I just wanted to pull out what you need to know. Okay. So what is so nice about Sanskrit is each letter only makes one sound. Okay, so it's just like Spanish, right? People say, well, it's nice to learn Spanish because each letter only makes one sound. Learning to pronounce and read English is a whole different story, right? We have letters that can make several different sounds, and you don't know unless you're taught. So if you pick up a Sanskrit mantra and you know the Sanskrit alphabet, you know how to pronounce it. Okay. So even if it takes some practice for sure, but each sound only has a one-to-one correspondence. And I thought it would be useful just to go through a little bit of review on the sounds that are crucial to good pronunciation. Of course, our vowels. And this is going to be interesting later, why I divided them between simple and complex. So just trust me that it's interesting, okay? The simple vowels are listed in this first line. And if you already have notes on the Sanskrit alphabet, you don't need to write this down. If it's new to you or you don't know where those notes are, this English letter A always makes the sound ah, ah. So if you want to write down a word to remember when you see it, hot, pop. Okay, always the sound ah. And you can already see in English, sometimes that's an O, right? So ah. Then the English letter I always makes the sound E in bead or sleep or read, always E. The Sanskrit letter U always makes the sound U, like in blue, blue, color blue, and the past tense of to blow, right? Blue. Already you see in English, right? We got UE or EW, always U. Then this other simple vowel causes people a lot of stress because we do not have it in English. It's a retroflex sound. And I'm thinking most of you probably remember this, but I'm going to go through what a retroflex sound is again, because they are the sound group, the place of articulation in Sanskrit that we don't have in English. So Sanskrit is an Indo-European language, and it has much in common with English, German, French. Okay, it's not some exotic language with all new sounds. This group, however, we don't have in English as a sound group. So if you take the tip of your tongue and you place the tip of your tongue on the back of your teeth, and then you start to move up, you're going to feel a bumpy ridge. So right here. And it almost feels like fish scales, all right? And if you come across that with your tongue, it'll get smooth. Okay, so those bumpy fish scales right above your teeth, that's called your alveolar ridge. And then as you move up, it becomes your hard palate. If you take your tongue across that bumpy ridge and stop right at the borderline between the hard palate, there's almost a little indentation there. So I'll try it. Ha. You're kind of right behind the beginning of your nose. See if you can find that with your tongue. And with the tongue curled back, that's why we say retroflex, right? It's a back bend for the tongue. You make English sounds just like you would in English, but the tongue position is different, so they're going to sound different. So if you bend your tongue back and then try to go rah, 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 make an R sound, rah, rah. And this rah sound in Sanskrit is a simple vowel. Okay. So as part of the vowel group, it does not require another vowel. Our simple vowels are a, I, U, ra. Okay. And then we're going to look at the complex vowels. And complex just means that there's more going on in your articulation. We're only going to see the first one and the third one in this mantra, but I thought it would make sense to be a little more complete. Okay. The first one, the English letter E, sounds like A. In play, hey, stay. Okay. Always the sound A. And it does in French as well, if you think of the word étude, right? Like a piano étude. And the reason it's complex is because there are two sounds going on. A. Okay, so not a simple sound. It's kind of like an ah in the beginning and then a ya. A. A. That makes sense. Okay. The next one is written AI. Always makes the sound I. And like capital letter I. Another good word to think of is the word for aisle, like the aisle in a church. So that's actually spelled AI. I. And again, it's complex because there's two sounds going on inside this one sound. I. Okay, so your mouth will have to move during it. During your simple vowels, your mouth doesn't have to move. Okay. The English letter O always sounds like O. And the word toe, mo, so, always O. Again, it's complex because it starts with O and then moves into what sounds like a W. O. And then the last one, written AU, sounds like ow, like in house or blouse. Two sounds, ow, ow. Okay, so the complex vowels in Sanskrit are A, I, O, ow. Okay, is that clear, easy? Coming back to you from teacher training. Okay, good. Okay, so then there are just some special sounds that are going to appear in this mantra too that are important to know about. One is the M with the dot underneath. The M with the dot underneath is usually listed with vowels in the Sanskrit alphabet. Sometimes the dot is under the M, sometimes it's above the M. They're equal. Okay, there's different conventions in writing the transliteration. So a dot under or over the M doesn't matter, same thing. The idea when you see an M dot is you're going to look at the vowel in front of it and you're going to nasalize it. Okay, so we look up here in our mantra, this last syllable, it's not an M dot. It sounds like nam, nam. All right. When we do see an M dot, like here, it's im, im. And to make it a little clearer, if I stick with just the letter A plus M, A plus M dot, Okay, so it's just a very little bit of contrast in the sound. It's take that vowel and okay, bring it up and kind of make your nasal cavity vibrate with it. Okay, and in mantra, we see a lot of M dots because they create resonance. All right, so we want our mantras to have a very resonant kind of sound, right? Sound is important, chanting is important. You're going to see a lot of M dot. And then Nikolai didn't have a dot under this M because of where it is in front of the T here. But oftentimes Om is Om. Okay, M dot. Clear? Yeah, okay. The other important thing to know is that Sanskrit has long vowels. So this is something we don't differentiate in English. If you see a vowel with a bar above it, right, a horizontal bar above it, that means make this vowel twice as long. The quality of it, though, doesn't change. So an A without a bar sounds like ah, with the bar, ah. The letter I without a bar sounds like E, with the bar, E. Okay, so that just means double the length of the vowel. Quality is the same. Okay. And then here we have two consonants that are retroflex, right? We said the R with the dot underneath it belongs to the vowel family. Here is an S and a T with a dot underneath it. Same idea. You're going to turn your tongue back to that kind of little indentation between your alveolar ridge and your hard palate. And then for the S, you're going to make the English sound sh, like we would write with SH. Sh, sh, sh. Okay. So Sanskrit does have our sh sound, but they also have a different sound, sh, sh, sh. Okay. And these sounds are really fun to make once you get comfortable with them. And then there's also a T version of it. So turn your tongue back to that spot and try to say the letter T. Ka, ka, ka. Sha, ka. And then I just listed the R again because it's so amazing. Okay. And then I'm going to go through this mantra now slowly. And I think that this is enough for you to recognize the sounds. Okay. And we're going to look at them even more deeply, but just going through it once now. Om Triyambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urva Rukamiva Bandhanan Mrityur Mukshya Mamritat. Okay. And we're going to figure out how to say that even more easily. But I think that all the other sounds are just like they would be in English. You don't need to remember them more deeply, right? The Y is ya, ma, ba, pa, sa. Okay, just like English. Okay, so are we good on like the pieces of alphabet? Any questions on that? Okay. So if you have a Sanskrit mantra in front of you, and sorry, something in the chat. Oh, can I talk about DH? Yes, Silky, I can. DH, here's an example of it, is a aspirated D. So I didn't pull that out because in English, at the beginning of a syllable, you will aspirate your D anyways. All right. You won't say dim, you'll say dim. When the H is there in Sanskrit, it's even a little bit more breathy. Dim, dim. Okay. So I hope that's helpful. There are distinctions in Sanskrit between an aspirated and an unaspirated consonant. So you will see pa, pa, ba, ba. What else? Ta, ta. But what's important to know is that we write it in English DH, so we know that this is the D that has a breath after it. In Sanskrit, it's its own sound. It is one letter. So there's a symbol for D, and it's a different symbol than the symbol for DH. Okay. As it's written here, just pronounce that H with your D and you'll be fine. This is a little bit of a cheater's approach. So I hope that's helpful. Okay. Alrighty. So if you have a Sanskrit mantra in front of you, it can be very intimidating, all right? Because the words are long. And oftentimes in Sanskrit, words will be put together, will be combined. So compound words, if you've ever looked at the Sanskrit version of the Yoga Sutra, can go on and on and on. They have no trouble putting 10 words together into one word. So whether it's this mantra or any mantra, the first thing I always do is I divide it into syllables. Okay, so I'm going to bring you back to English class in middle school or junior high, back to like 5th or 6th grade. And if you can remember breaking English words into syllables. So you remember that idea of CV, a consonant vowel, or a syllable could be CVC, consonant vowel, consonant. Okay. So every syllable must have a vowel as its nucleus. So if you're looking at a word, each vowel will be part of its own syllable. So you can say a vowel on its own, a, e, u. You can hardly say a consonant on its own. Right? We need a vowel after it to allow us to really articulate it. So if I'm looking at a mantra, I'm seeing the vowels in the mantra, and I'm knowing that each vowel will be a syllable. So the question then is, where do the consonants go? And for years, I told people, listen to a recording. And that's a good way to do it, right? You can listen to a recording and you can be like, those are the syllable boundaries, right? And then I was following a course since COVID where they talked about how there really is a rule for how syllables break in Sanskrit. And the idea is this: if there is one consonant, it's going to go with the syllable to the right. If there are two, they'll split down the middle. If there are 3 consonants in a row, the first one will go to the syllable at the left. All the other ones will go right. Okay, so we're going to see an example of this so it makes more sense. But those are the rules for syllable boundaries in Sanskrit. If there's one consonant, it breaks to the right. If there are 2, they break in half. If there are more than 2, the first one goes this way, all the other ones go right. So if I give you a Sanskrit mantra and you know that, you can put in syllable boundaries without ever hearing it. And that's nice, right? Especially because you can't always find a recording of something you want to learn. So let's see how that would work with this mantra. Okay. And this is where I'm going to tell you about the 2 biggest errors I always hear in this mantra. Okay, so Om is a vowel and a consonant. It's one word all by itself. So there's our syllable boundary here. Then we had this word Triambakam. How do we break that? Okay, so we know that a syllable needs a vowel. So it's going to be this A, right? So obviously the consonants in front of it stay in front of it. And then we had the M and the B. 2 consonants split down the middle. Okay. After the A, we had the K. If there's one consonant, it goes right. So we're able to divide Triam, Ba, Kam. Triam, Ba, Kam. This word in 3 syllables. So this word is one syllable. Okay. And when we as English speakers see T-R-Y, we want to say try. So a lot of people say Triambakam, Triambakam. Okay, but there's no I vowel here. All one sound. Triam, triam, triam. It's a little hard to do, but it's correct. Okay, so since you guys have your microphones off, if you want to even practice that, try to say this syllable, T-R-Y-A-M, as one syllable. Trium, trium, trium. Not trium. Trium. Okay, so that's a biggie. So Om, trium, ba, come, ya, ja, ma, hey. Okay. So sometimes when we had our full moon meditations, I used to pass out a version of this where I wrote it out phonetically. Okay. So again, as English speakers, we see HE as a syllable and want to say he. All right. So you have to keep your Sanskrit on. This letter E makes it sound A. Okay. But I handed out a version of this. So we have people just walking in who had never studied Sanskrit at all or heard this mantra before, and I'd write it out H-A-Y. All right, just to make sure that it came out right. Okay, so we could try this line. Om, triam, ba, kam, ya, ja, ma, he. And then as soon as you see it in syllables, so much easier, right? Good. So our next word was this sugandhim. How to break it? Okay, here's our vowel, right? So we know that's the nucleus. Go past that, we have a consonant, so it's going to break here, right? One consonant goes to the right. Su, gun. And then this is one letter. Okay, D. But even if we thought it was two, the rules would still apply. If there are multiple consonants, first one goes left, all the other ones go right. Su, gun, tim. Su, gun, dim. Su, gun, dim. Okay, and then we have this longer word, pushtivardhanam. How do we divide that? Okay, so we got our first vowel here, and we have sh and ta. There are two consonants. They divide in half. One goes left, one goes right. Push, ti. Push, ti. Okay, here's this consonant. If there's one, it goes right. Var, da, nam. Okay, same thing here between the R and the DH. One consonant goes left, all other ones go right. Var, da, nam. One consonant goes right. Okay. So hopefully this makes sense. And if it doesn't, you'll still have this and you'll still have the Maha Mrityunjaya mantra written out in syllables. But do try it, especially with something you know, and see if it works. All right, you can test it out. So su, gan, team, push, ti, var, ta, nam. That good? Okay. Okay, next line. Again, we have two consonants after our vowel, so they divide in half. Ur, va. And then this is the second big mispronunciation I hear all the time, is for some reason, lots of people say orva. And I don't know why, because I don't even think as an English speaker, I would say that. So somebody's out there saying orva, because as people come around the fire, I hear this and I think, okay, so trium and urva, not orva. Okay, so you can listen to that too. There's somebody out there, maybe a kirtan singer or something that is saying orva. Okay, these are nice syllables, nice simple ones. Ru, ka, mi, va. All right, so both consonant vowels. Here again, we have the divide between two consonants. Ban, ta, nan. So the whole line. Ur, va, ru, ka, mi, va, ban, ta, nan. Okay, long A, on. All right. And now the last line, for dividing that into syllables, we need to remember that the R dot is a vowel. So it can hold a syllable together. It can be a nucleus. And this M-R-T sounds like Mrit, 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 Mrit. And sometimes in English, we'll put an I in there to help people. People will say Mrit. Mrit isn't quite accurate because there's not a letter I in there. It's not Mrit, 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 Mrit. One syllable. Okay. And this R dot you'll see in words like the word Krishna. All right, so in Krishna, we put an I in again to make it easy. But if you see it written out in good transliteration, the word Krishna is K, R dot, S dot, N dot, A. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. But we'll say Krishna to make it easier. All right. So the I facilitates the pronunciation of this vowel that we don't have in English. But Mrit, 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 Mrit. Okay. And then the syllable boundary comes between the T and the Y, two consonants, divide them in half. Mrit, yor. Again, syllable boundary between R and M. Muk. Syllable boundary between K and sh. Muk, she, ya, ma. Again, this is its own syllable. Mr, 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 mr. Not mri, mr. Tat. And if you chant this over and over again, it becomes really fun, these sounds. Mrit, yor, muk, she, ya, ma, mr, tat. Okay, so I'll do the whole thing slow in syllables. Om, triam, ba, kam, ya, ja, ma, he, su, gun, team, push, ti, var, ta, nam. Ur, va, ru, ka, mi, va, ban, ta, nan. Mrit, yor, muk, shi, ya, ma, mrit, tat. Okay, so I'll sit here for a minute, see if you can read this to yourself. And if anything feels sticky or confusing, let me know. Let's grab my. Yeah, and I hope it's fun to say too. Very good. So now I'm going to take you one level even deeper into pronunciation. And so this is to pronounce it absolutely perfectly. All right. And if you know it like this, as long as you're honoring the vowel qualities, you're going to be great. But there's also in Sanskrit stress on certain syllables, just like there is in English. All right. So some syllables are heavier. Again, you don't need to know this because I'm going to give it to you with stress marked on it. But if you're looking at other mantras besides this one and you want to know where stress is, there's a rule. So one of the reasons Sanskrit is so lovely to work with is there really are rules for everything. It is such a orderly kind of language. So the rule is this: a syllable is light if it is just vowel, or I'm sorry, if it is just a simple vowel, a, I, U, R, or if it is just a consonant simple vowel. All other syllables are heavy. Okay, so if it was a consonant and a long vowel, if it was consonant, vowel, consonant, if it's a consonant and a complex vowel, So basically they're all heavy unless it's just a simple vowel or just a consonant simple vowel. Does that make sense? So let's see that in practice. What does that look like? So I'm going to put the words back together on this next slide, right? So it's not too convoluted looking. And here is our mantra again, back in its word together form with accent marked. So here's the rule for figuring out where to put the stress in a Sanskrit word. If you look at the word in front of you, go all the way to the last syllable, and it's never the last syllable, unless it's a one syllable word, right? It's never the last syllable. So what you're going to do is from the last syllable, you're going to start moving left. So you're going to start climbing up the word. And when you find a heavy syllable, that's the stress. Okay, so you're going to bypass all the light syllables. And as soon as you find a heavy one, that's the syllable that takes the stress. If you get all the way to the front of your word and you never found a heavy syllable, it'll be the first syllable. Okay. So we look at this word, Triambakam. The last syllable was kam. It's never the last syllable, so we move to the left. Could it be ba? No, it cannot be ba because it is a light syllable. A light syllable is a consonant and a simple vowel or just a simple vowel. So no, can't be ba. So we go left. Triam is both our last choice and a heavy syllable. Okay, so we'll stress triam. Sounds like Om Triambakam. Triambakam. Okay, so then we get to our next word, the Yajamahe. Okay, last syllable, hey. Could it be this? No, it's never the last syllable. So I'm going to move left. Could it be ma? No, ma is a light syllable. Couldn't be that. Go left. Could it be ja? Ah, yes, it can, right? Because this is a long vowel. Again, a light syllable is just a simple vowel, and short simple vowel. I should be even more clear. A short simple vowel all by itself, or a consonant plus short simple vowel. Okay, so ja would be considered a heavy syllable. That'll take our stress. Yeah, jamahe. Om Triambakam Yajamahe. Good. You can see how this becomes even more fun to chant once you got the stress in there, right? Gives it kind of a beat. Okay, my next word, Sugandhim. Could it be deem? No, it's a heavy syllable, but it's the last one and it's never the last one. So I'm going to go left. Could it be gun? Yes, all right, because it's CVC. It's a heavy syllable. Sugandhim. Okay, now this next word is so super long, right? But we can do this. Go back. Nam, never the last one. All right. Da. No, this is a light syllable. Okay. Again, DH is one letter. Var. Okay, here we got our heavy syllable. Consonant, vowel, consonant. So pushti vardanam. Pushti vardanam. Yeah. And feel free to move your hands around when you're practicing these. It's interesting if you see people in India are still teaching Vedic texts as oral tradition. And the kids, the boys sitting there will use gestures, right, to mark certain tones and things in the chanting. And sometimes even the teacher will have his hand on the boys' heads and say, Om Triambakam, yeah, Jamahe. So there's kind of a physical, like corporal learning to this as well. And they have certain hand gestures to aid in memory. Okay. Urva Rukamiva, again, super long word. Va, no, it's light. Mi is light. Ka is light. Ru is light. Here we got a long vowel, it's heavy. Urva Rukamiva. Urva Rukamiva. Okay. Okay, banda nan. Now, nan is a heavy syllable, but it's last. Can't be that. Da, light. Must be ban. Bandanan. Bandanan. Okay, down here again, we have a long word, and this is one of those compounds, again, that we see a lot in Sanskrit, right? So these are kind of two thoughts made into one word. Okay. So come all the way to the end. Ya, never the last one. She. Ah, that's heavy because it's a long vowel. Mrityormuk shia. Mrityormuk shia. Okay. And our last word, tat, never the last one. Br. Nope, light. Ma. Both heavy and our last choice. Mamritat. Okay, so if I went through this and I was really exaggerated, I could say Om Triyambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urva Rukamiva Bandhanan Mrityur Mukshya Mamritat. And feel free when you practice this too to. Okay, questions? Anybody? Rosa.
So besides Om, are there other words that wouldn't have a stress? Or is every word going to have a stress?
Well, Om isn't really part of this mantra.
Okay.
You're going to see Om in front of lots of different mantras. And sometimes it'll even be left out when somebody's discussing it. In Vedic chanting or in mantra chanting, a lot of times it's setting the tone. And if you've heard Nikolai do this, sometimes he'll actually hold the Om for a while to let everybody hear it. He'll be like, Om Triyambakam Yajamahe. You know, so you all hear it and you say, okay. Or he might start it like lower. Om Triyambakam Yajamahe. So it's kind of a tone setter for oral chanting.
So every word is going to have a stress in it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? You're kind of looking at then any mantra in Sanskrit that you want to work with, right? We're looking at this one today. You can look at the literal meaning. Look at which sounds are different from English sounds. Break it into syllables. Mark your stress. And you have all the tools you need to really practice it. Okay. So why don't we say it together a little bit slowly with our accent marked. Okay. So when you're ready, Om Triyambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam Urva Rukamiva Bandhanan Mrityur Mukshya Mamritat. Good. All righty. So any other?
Can I just ask you a general question, Tracy? You're what I've understood, but I may be wrong, is that you're not supposed to say the Gayatri mantra and the Maha Mrityunjaya, together or on the same practice or something like that. I don't know if that's true or not, or if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, they kind of do different things, right? They have a different focus. So, I mean, it's not like you'll be struck by lightning if you do. It's just, usually it's better in a practice when we're really focused on something. So if you have your guru mantra, your initiation mantra that you meditate on all the time, you always use that, all right? And then you can add something, all right? So your initiation mantra is used every day for your practice. If I also need healing, or I'm also concerned with a loved one maybe who's passing, and I feel that I need to bring in the Maha Mrityunjaya mantra, I could do it all by itself another time in the day, different time from my guru mantra, or I could put those two practices together. Okay, so your guru mantra is your placeholder. You could add a practice to that. Okay, the focus of the Gayatri mantra is something more like clarity. Okay, so that is a mantra to the inner sun, right? Inner clarity. The Gayatri I would be attracted to if I was having a lot of mental confusion, trouble concentrating, a lot of delusion, maybe. So it's not so much that they clash in any bad kind of way. It's just they're doing different things, you know? And so if I was using the Maha Mrityunjaya, you could use it once, all right? I need to do this practice today. Better if we're doing it over time. Okay, so if something is going on in your life, I'm going to say the Maha Mrityunjaya once, twice, 5 times at my practice for the amount of time we usually consider a really nice practice is 40 days, all right, to create a real groove. So for 40 days, I'm going to say the Maha Mrityunjaya this many times after I do my mantra practice, or I'm going to do it before bed or first thing in the morning, right? We make a kind of sankalpa or vow to do something like that. And you could, like, if you were just practicing Sanskrit, you could read through all your mantras, right? Because then your intention is just working on pronunciation. So if it was more of a pronunciation practice, definitely you can read through them all. But better to pick up one and hold it for a while and build its Shakti and then work with the other one. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Okay. Anything else either about this or anything in general? Kind of good. I hope this was helpful in making you feel confident pronouncing this mantra. We have a Sanskrit class page. I think I've given it to people in teacher training. I think it's just hibuffalo.org/Sanskrit. There's lots of recordings on there too. So if you want to go here, Panditji's recording, I believe, is on there. The one thing I'm going to tell you about Nikolai's recording is that he does some Vedic stuff that's going to be a little different. So it's fun to hear, but it's going to sound a little different because he'll be doing the tones and things. But you can listen to Panditji's recording is quite clear. And let's see, I got another chat. Okay, so Silky says, yes, let's do the Gayatri. Yes, let's do the Gayatris next time. So I can talk to Jackie, and we wouldn't even have to go again through what are the special sounds and all that. We could even just meet for 45 minutes, look at the literal meaning, break it into syllables, mark stress, and then you'd have that too in your toolbox, or any other mantras too that interest you guys. The prayers of the tradition are considered Vedic mantras. They're not from the Rig Veda itself. They're from the Upanishads. So they are still part of that Vedic corpus, but they're later. All right. So if you're thinking about the student teacher prayer or the Asato Ma, right? These are still Vedic mantras, just a little bit newer. But we can go through them and do the same thing as well. Okay. All righty. So anything else? Okay. All clear. Good. So I will send you guys the recording, and let me just quickly jot down who's here because I'll send it to everybody just to make sure. And see, my cat was so good. He's just appearing now. I got Kim, me, Cassie, and Silky. Okay, so I'll send you the recording if there's anything you want to hear in that again, and I will send the PowerPoint with it. Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Tracy. This was great.
Good. I'm so glad.
Thank you.
Great to see you all. So practice
Thanks,
on.
Tracy.
Okay, have a great Sunday. Enjoy.
This is so needed right now, Tracy. Thank you so, so much.
I know you are right in the healing mode, so.
I'm still in the opioid induced trying to get through the lightning bolt shooting out of my eyes mode. So yeah.
Yeah, I know that those episodes definitely come in every life.
Yeah.
Now you have a tool.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good to see everyone.
Yep, have a
Bye.
great day. Bye.
Bye.